Hello, my name's Ajay and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Robin Marsh. Robin is the Secretary General of the Universal Peace Federation here in the UK. He has also been the coordinator behind the Middle East Peace Initiative and has travelled to Israel and Palestine over 19 times. Robin, thank you for joining us on The Defining Moment.
Thank you very much.
Well, before we get into today's topic, which is actually looking at the Middle East Peace Initiative, can you please share with us a defining moment from your life?
We were talking before about the experience of going to the Middle East, and with all the history that has entwined the UK, Britain, and the Middle East, and visiting there and seeing the people, meeting the people in their current circumstance. And I remember going with Lord Ahmed of Rotherham. We had a wonderful visit. We visited Gaza, we visited various places in Nazareth, and one place we went to was the International Centre for the Red Cross. And there the relatives of Palestinian prisoners had gathered, and they all had pictures. They had pictures of their father, their brother, their son, sometimes their daughter, and many of them were crying, sharing the stories of the missing, their yearning for their relative who's been away from them for a considerable period of time. And they saw us as something of hope. They saw us bringing people of significance like Lord Ahmed as something which was hopeful for them. They could get out their message. Another time, I remember going to create a meeting where a prominent journalist, who is a friend of the current Israeli Prime Minister Olmert, and this journalist, Ehud Yari, he's known as slightly right-of-centre TV commentator on Middle East issues, and particularly as an originally an Iraqi Jew. He's fluent in Arabic and has many relationships throughout the region. He talked about the current situation in a way that many of the participants of our group had not heard before. Many of them were Muslim, were from Britain, used to hearing from Arabic satellite channels the view of the Israel-Palestine situation. And when they had this interchange of views, sometimes it was quite robust, it was quite frank. They could exchange views within the context of this meeting, and there was a dialogue, there was a change for those Muslims from Britain to hear that the hotel where we were staying at, in each direction, north, south, east, and west, there had been at least one suicide bombing within 100 yards of that hotel in the last 2 years prior to that visit. It was quite shocking for them. For him also to hear the views of Europeans of many different backgrounds was also quite a changing point for him. So to see this interchange of views was something which showed the value of MEPI, of the Middle East Peace Initiative. And to contrast these two experiences, we could see that MEPI has a lot of value in promoting dialogue.
Now, obviously, the Middle East is a situation that's in constant turmoil. There's always something in the news about the Middle East. However, I mean, it seems to be often more than not, every time there's a sense of hope, the next day, it seems, there's also then some tragedy, and it seems like the situation goes back to square one. So as an individual, how do you maintain your own sense of passion? And in fact, what is actually driving you in your own, if you like, personal sense of mission within the Middle East?
I think with going many times, making friendships, making relationships, hearing people's stories, understanding that when you hear the news here in our house and our home, on the radio here in London, where we have stability over a long period of time and economic prosperity, to see the news, knowing the people who are part of that news, it really gives me a feeling that I want to be part of the solution. I want to be helping in some way, even if it's a small way. Also knowing that area has so much potential. There's such a dynamic in in that region, the place where immense tourism would come if there was peace and stability. Last Christmas, Bethlehem was full for the first time for a long, long time. To see also the intelligence of the Palestinian people, the intelligence of the Israeli people, knowing that this area could be not just a tiger economy, it could be a lion economy. It would be one of the major economic areas of the world if there was peace and stability. And knowing also the religious history of the area and the significance of it. It gives me a sense of if we can really help to bring peace there, it would significantly influence our whole world, both economically, and also it would have tremendous influence on the conflicts from Nigeria to Indonesia. So it is an area of great significance, and to have a role in it, even a small role, is I think very important to me. Also, to build a peace majority. Currently there is a lack of a majority, particularly within Israel, of a majority that can trust if they give up land, if they give land to the Palestinian people, will that guarantee them peace. So there's a certain core of people who trust that it will, but it's not a majority, and it's quite short of a majority. So to deal with to deal with religious people within Israel is very important to build that peace majority.
But surely there are those voices that are screaming out, well, actually religion itself, or the conflict of religion itself is actually the problem.
Yes, there are many who believe that. So to win over the people who are seen to be the problem by many actually is very important. They're also the group which will have to make sacrifices, but they're also the group that can be moved by God, by their inner religious experience, to have a different view, to embrace others. So religion is both currently possibly a block, but also a way of solution.
Now, personally, I've had the privilege of actually going on one of the MEPI, the Middle East Peace Initiative, fact-finding tours a couple of years ago. And since then, I've kind of been keeping a tab on it. And it seems to me that it's kind of branded itself in this interfaith vein, or certainly taking that approach. But there's a bit more to it than that, isn't there?
Yes. MEPI, I think, has a strong interfaith element. It's always brought religious people, because religious people have so much interest in the Middle East, and particularly in Israel and Palestine and Jerusalem and Nazareth, Bethlehem, etc. But MEPI has many more aspects to it. It's tried to bring different ways, to create different forum through which both Israelis and Palestinians can come together. So whether it's youth service, whether it's playing football for peace, whether it is women's approach for peace, whether it is medical people working together for peace. These are different ways that people can come together. And there is a foundation of many, many NGOs already working in many of these areas. And MEPI is helping as one of them to bring many people together. We also bring a network of ambassadors for peace. These people who have goodwill, that we have given an award of ambassadors for peace because of their public service in different continents of the world. We're bringing these people of goodwill to the Middle East, where there is a lot of suffering and conflict. And naturally, by being there and bringing their attention on the area, they want to be involved. And they get into relationships with the local NGOs who are working constructively for peace. And when they go back to their countries, those relationships remain. So they will fundraise, or they will lobby, they will speak to their friends and their people within their NGOs in their countries to support those constructive projects. And often they will invite representatives of those projects to their countries to speak and to promote their work.
So with all these fact-finding tours that you've been involved in over the years, what's your own sense of what you'd like people to be walking away with? What's the takeaway, so to speak?
We've had different kinds of visits. In the beginning, particularly, there was more of a pilgrimage, a sense of religious people going to a place which may be the starting of their faith. So it was more of a pilgrimage plus some understanding of the political and the civil situation there. So those people came away with life-changing experiences visiting Nazareth or Bethlehem or Galilee, Jerusalem. Later on also we had visits of young people doing service projects who could see, by doing a service project in a Palestinian town, the situation of normal people, of normal life of Palestinian people. And then they could go to a Jewish town or a Jewish village and do a service project there and understand the psyche, the feeling, the mood of Jewish people. So they came away with a much deeper understanding of the two peoples and the situation from a very grassroots level. We've also had fact-finding tours where people have come away with a more accurate and first-hand impression. But always we would hope that people would come away wanting to be involved and wanting to support the constructive, the reconciliation groups who are building peace in the region.
Now, Robin, the Middle East Peace Initiative, it seems on at least face value to be yet another combination of the work between the US and the UK and, of course, also Europe. But particularly Europe taking a kind of grassroots involvement. So is MEPI yet another example of how, for example, in the past, Clinton and Blair, or nowadays Bush and Brown, are trying to create an alliance in order to address the Middle East? Or are you, as an organization, trying to also include the international community?
Yes, the principal role has been played by the American leadership of the Universal Peace Federation. Though currently the International Universal Peace Federation leadership has been coordinating, I think, for the last year. But the majority of the effort, I think, has been by the American leadership. And I think secondary would be by the European group, where we've sent former prime ministers of Romania and Bosnia, and many politicians from around Europe have gone and drawn senior leaderships from both Israel and Palestine to meet them and to speak to them. But, there seems to be very much a Christian and Muslim response from different continents of the world, but also Jewish representatives from Europe and from America have also participated. This last time, representatives from Africa, from South America, from Korea, Japan, different parts of Asia also went. And at other times, people from each continent have gone.
Okay, now the MEPI project itself is actually not a political organization. There has no political slant. So how, in fact, are you actually looking to apply pressure in the peace-building process?
MEPI is strictly neutral. We don't go with an agenda to favour one side or the other. We show each side fairly, as broadly as we can. And we're often, we have been criticised by favouring one side or the other, but usually we've been criticised by both sides, if that's the case. So we have made great efforts and talked long and hard of how we could keep a good balance between both sides. That said, to be a neutral friend, I think, has an important position, because people on both sides are looking for a neutral perspective. They want a voice that they can trust. What should we be doing? What are we doing wrong? Quietly, not with a megaphone, not to do megaphone diplomacy, but quietly to make suggestions. You can minimize the backlash by doing this, or wouldn't it be better if you did this? To quietly say these kinds of points is much, much better, as a person is trusted, whose opinion is valued, has much more of a value.
And you mentioned earlier that MEPI is not only working within the area of interfaith, but there's also the youth involvement, women's involvement, sports, and even service. Can you tell us about any of the success stories? For example, you mentioned a medical project.
I think Israel and Palestine have a number of NGOs which are already doing great work. And in the medical area, there is already a foundation of very noble Israeli doctors who still are going into the West Bank, Palestinian areas, and supporting medical service. The numbers aren't huge, but that takes a lot of courage to go and to serve the other community where your safety is not assured. Those people have my great appreciation. There is a Hippocratic oath of doctors all around the world who value people, as human beings, before their allegiance to a particular nation or faith or creed. So on this foundation, Israeli and Palestinian doctors to some extent have worked together, particularly after the Second Intifada in September 2000. The extent to which they worked together drastically reduced. Unfortunately, 2000, then it was very difficult for Israeli doctors to go into the West Bank. It was also more difficult for Palestinian ambulances and so on to come into Israeli areas for many reasons. So for us to go as a third party and to help facilitate, to support, to give a kickstart, if you'd say, or to build on a foundation which is already there, is very useful and has been welcomed. So we were working together with a medical aid agency called Saving Lives, which is run by a Rotarian called Peter Patel, who has done many projects in India and other parts of the world. Peter Patel is someone who gives 50% of his time to these efforts. He is not a member of Universal Peace Federation, but he's someone who knows of our Middle East Peace Initiative, and he's participated in two of them. And he made a suggestion that the work that he did in India between Muslims and Hindus to set up collaborative health centers could be taken to Israel-Palestine as a way to build peace. And this is something that we've been working with as a partner, together with several hospitals and other groups. He is the project director of what we call the Holy Land Medical Project. And we are seeking to set up training centers which can train, first of all, trainers, either doctors or nurses, and to establish a system of training which can build up healthcare in the West Bank, particularly with the support also of Israeli doctors. And we're seeking to set up a trust of Israeli and Palestinian doctors and business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders who can work together to support this project.
And can you, from all your experiences, share with us how you think, or how you feel perhaps, that the process of building peace in the Middle East can actually come about based on the projects you're doing, but also based on, of course, the deeper issues that are out there? How do you see things perhaps unfolding for the better in the future?
Currently there's a great weariness amongst people there. People are frustrated, exasperated, fed up. There's particularly on the Palestinian side, there's great economic suffering. On the Israeli side, there's also been great suffering, and also the history of the Jewish people through the Holocaust, and prior to the Holocaust, the suffering of people. There's great need for security. So in this situation, there is a great weariness of how can we find peace? How can we trust the other side to make peace and to come together? I see the peace being built from the grassroots, that people need to learn to trust each other, to build relationships, to build friendships, that the economic situation has to improve for Palestinian people, so that in conjunction with the Israeli people, the two communities can work together to build a great economic development in that region of the world. That we can, through economy, through business, through faith, through interfaith dialogue, through service, through many ways of meeting, of talking, of building relationships, building confidence in each other, that there can be a growing trust that if they do make the very painful concessions to make peace, that there will be a stable situation in which both communities will thrive and maybe after a period of time come together in a greater way.
Now, of course, on our show, we've interviewed quite a few of the ambassadors for peace. Now, what's been their involvement as a network in the Middle East Peace Initiative?
One thing I like to say is the Middle East Peace Initiative doesn't stop at Tel Aviv Airport. So people coming to on one of the fact-finding tours or the visits to the Middle East, they don't just come, arrive in Tel Aviv Airport, have a 3-4 day, 5-day experience, leave and forget it. But we like to take people who have good conscience, people who are concerned, people who want to know more how to solve the situation, how to work with the situation in order to help it to find peace. There is a sense that whatever happens in the Middle East will affect what happens in London, what happens in Brussels, what happens in Paris, what happens in Washington, D.C. On the streets, there is a great pain, hurt, and bitterness about what is happening in that region. So whatever we can do to help build peace there will affect our own communities. So ambassadors for peace, I hope, go with a sense of trying to find out what they can do. And when they are there, they build relationships which they can maintain when they return. They can invite those people to come to their countries and give them a platform on which to speak in their countries. They can fundraise for the good causes that they discover through our visits. When they hear the stories of the Bereaved Family Forum, of an Israeli who has lost a close family relative, a Palestinian who has lost a close family relative, rather than channeling their grief into revenge, seeking to channel that grief into reconciliation, to make an Israeli-Palestinian partnership, a pair who then go and talk to schools together, talk to community centres together, or come to London together to speak about their experiences and to speak about how they could channel that grief into something which builds a more hopeful future. So the ambassadors for peace meet these people, they hear from them, they can support them when they come back to their country. They can meet people from One Voice, they can meet people from Neve Shalom, sometimes when we've visited there, or many other groups that we've heard from us, spoken to, or visited in their own headquarters and centres, both in Ramallah and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and other places. So the ambassadors for peace come, I hope, with a mind to see how they can help, and they return with that mind and use that to continue their effort, because they know it's going to happen on their street if there's further conflict. That conflict will be transposed to their own communities.
You mentioned earlier, Robin, that there are also other NGOs out there, as well as, of course, international bodies working in this area. But what are the lessons that MEPI in itself, as a movement, let's say, can share? What are the lessons that you've learned?
I think the importance of taking a neutral perspective, of listening empathetically, not trying to judge, not criticizing, but to express opinions, but with an attitude of respect and of appreciating people's situations and choices, even though they wouldn't be the ones we would take. But to be a neutral friend, I think is very important, to go there to understand and to seek to build, and to be a neutral friend who can give advice maybe quietly, but not with a megaphone. That just builds more barriers.
Finally, Robin, I asked you earlier, what's driving you? What's the passion behind the work you're doing within the MEPI project? I'd like to also ask you now, what gives you hope?
I think I feel hope when I meet inspiring people who are suffered much more than I ever have, and have gone beyond that suffering to work for peace. Someone I always think of is Ali Abu Awad, who was a very charismatic person, but he lost his brother in a very tragic circumstance, which could have led him to being embittered and hateful and seek revenge, but instead has taken the course of nonviolence, has gone to many of his schoolmates, his friends, to persuade them not to take a violent course. He started off an organization called El Tariq, which is pro-democratic citizenship education amongst young people. We did a fundraising concert for them and supported them and visited their headquarters in Ramallah 2 times. He's always spoken of nonviolence and the value of nonviolence, of working together with Israelis and Palestinians of good mind, of trying to work as moderates together to persuade the extremes to take their campaigning in non-violent ways. I think of people like him, and I think of people like Rami Elhanan, who also has spoken of the value of non-violence, of campaigning in non-political ways, or Professor Muli Peleg of One Voice, who's a very charismatic person who is leading a youth education campaign to teach young people to campaign for peace, of teaching them to value more democratic ways of campaigning for peace. And he's done great work, and he's a very inspiring person. So when I see people like this, it gives me great hope. When I see religious leaders who are counseling their people of their congregation, of their mosque, their temple, their synagogue, when they've taught them, how to overcome grief and to love people, as God's children, rather than to teach them to overcome their grief through hurting someone else of the other community. That gives me hope. But I think also, it's a place of great religious significance where if we can bring peace to the core of these 3 great faiths, it will have a great influence throughout the whole world. Because of my religious conviction, I feel it has to be possible. It has to be that God has some way to build peace between these 3 people, because God is the founder of these 3 people, these 3 peoples. Thank you.
Well, likewise, in light of the people that have given you hope, I'd like to thank you also for your own heroic efforts, and thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. If you'd like to see more of our shows, we're on the web at www.definingmoment.eu. Thank you for watching, and we wish you all the best.